0800 hours, Philippine Sea. The morning sun sits heavy on the horizon, casting a shimmering gold leaf across the gently rolling swells of the Pacific. On the flight deck of the massive supercarrier, the air is thick with the smell of JP-5 jet fuel and the rhythmic hum of heavy machinery. Blue-shirted handlers move with practiced ease, securing chocks and chains on a line of parked fighter jets, while catapult crews perform routine checks on the steam tracks. The vast ocean stretches out in every direction, seemingly empty and infinite, offering a deceptive sense of absolute isolation and security. Inside the hull, the mess decks are crowded with sailors finishing breakfast, their laughter muffled by inches of hardened steel. Deep within the ship's hull, the Combat Direction Center is a cavern of darkness, illuminated only by the soft blue and green glow of tactical displays. Operators sit in ergonomic chairs, headsets clamped tight, monitoring the Aegis combat system's digital horizon. The air here is chilled to protect the massive server banks, smelling faintly of ozone and recycled oxygen. For hours, the screens have shown nothing but the steady, predictable orbits of friendly patrol craft and distant commercial traffic. A senior chief petty officer leans against a console, steaming coffee mug in hand, watching the rhythmic sweep of the long-range volume search radar. The calm shatters when a tiny, jagged icon blinks into existence at the very top of the primary glass. It is not moving like a plane. It is not moving like a traditional ballistic missile. The altitude readout flickers, climbing past 100,000 feet before the velocity counter begins a terrifying vertical climb. The computer struggles to maintain a track, the red dot jumping in erratic leaps across the tactical grid. The senior chief sets his coffee down, his eyes narrowing as he leans closer to the glass. He taps a command on the touchscreen, attempting to slew a satellite sensor toward the contact. The numbers on the speed indicator turn yellow, then a vibrating, angry red as the contact exceeds Mach 5. The silence of the command center is replaced by the rapid-fire clicking of keyboards. Tactical officers lean forward, their faces pale in the monitor light. The sensor data confirms the nightmare. Multiple high-altitude gliders are skipping along the edge of the atmosphere, trailing plasma wakes that confuse the infrared trackers. The massive ship beneath their feet begins to vibrate as the engines go to full power, the hull groaning under the sudden strain. An officer reaches for the general quarters lever. The bong 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 of the alarm screams through every compartment, a piercing metallic shriek that instantly replaces the morning calm with high-velocity chaos. Sailors in the mess deck drop trays, the sound of plastic crashing against tile ignored as they bolt for their stations. On the flight deck, the yellow-shirted directors begin waving their arms frantically, clearing the landing area. The massive elevators whine as they begin to descend, hurrying to tuck vulnerable aircraft into the hangar bay. The carrier begins a hard banking turn, the deck tilting at an aggressive angle that sends loose gear sliding across the steel. In the ship's nerve center, the captain slams his fist onto the arm of his command chair, yelling into his headset for the screening destroyers to link their firing solutions. The tactical displays show the hypersonic threats beginning their terminal dive, plummeting from the blackness of space toward the blue water at 5 times the speed of sound. The outer defense ring is being bypassed entirely. The weapon systems are struggling to lock onto targets that move faster than the computer's ability to predict a future position. The atmosphere of professional calm has evaporated, replaced by the raw, kinetic energy of a crew realizing they are in the crosshairs of a weapon they cannot see with the naked eye. 0805 hours, Combat Information Center, guided missile destroyer. The red lighting of general quarters bathes the room in a sinister, bloody glow. The air handling units roar at maximum capacity, struggling to cool the overheated electronics racks. Dozens of sailors hunch over their consoles, their hands flying across trackballs and keyboards with desperate speed. The ship heels violently to starboard, throwing unsecured manuals and coffee cups across the linoleum deck. The hull shudders as the gas turbine engines scream, pushing the vessel to its flank speed. Outside, the ocean churns into a white froth as the bow cuts through the waves, burying itself in the swells before rising again with a spray of salt water. The tactical action officer stands behind the weapons coordinator. He stares at the main display. The threat tracks are not arcing in a smooth parabola. They are skipping. The red icons jink laterally, performing high-G maneuvers at the edge of the stratosphere that defy traditional ballistic physics. The computer struggles to generate a firing solution, the lock indicator flickering from solid to flashing. The hypersonic glide vehicles are surfing the atmosphere, changing course to evade the radar waves pulsing upward from the fleet. On the foredeck, the vertical launch silo hatches blast open. The heavy steel doors slam back against the deck plating. The sound of compressed air hissing signals the ignition sequence. A massive cloud of white smoke erupts from the cells, instantly engulfed by a pillar of orange fire. The ship shudders violently as the long-range interceptor missiles roar out of their tubes. They climb straight up, punching through the smoke, their rocket motors painting jagged white streaks against the blue morning sky. One after another, the interceptors launch, turning the deck into a scorching hellscape of exhaust and noise. Inside the bridge, the captain grabs the overhead handle to steady himself against the turn. He barks orders into the squawk box, his voice fighting against the vibration of the hull. The destroyer places itself physically between the incoming threat and the carrier. The phalanx close-in weapon systems spin up, their radar domes rotating rapidly as they search for low-flying debris. Chaff launchers on the superstructure fire, exploding into glittering clouds of aluminum strips designed to confuse the incoming sensors. The ship is now a bristling porcupine of active defenses, throwing everything it has into the air. High above, the interceptors shed their booster stages. They burn toward the edge of space, seeking the heat signatures of the hypersonic gliders. The two technologies race toward a collision point. The American missiles adjust their fins, correcting for the erratic movement of the Chinese weapons. But the gliders are too fast. They depress their noses, initiating a terminal dive that builds velocity to unbearable levels. The radar screens on the destroyer wash out with static as the gliders deploy electronic jamming countermeasures. The icons multiply, creating ghost targets that clutter the battle space. The tactical action officer yells that the primary vampire has slipped the net. The interceptors detonate harmlessly in the upper atmosphere, blowing apart empty air where the target used to be. The real threat is now screaming down at sea level, heat shields glowing white-hot from the friction. The sonic boom reaches the water before the missile does, a physical hammer of air that flattens the waves. The destroyer's final line of defense, the automated 5-inch gun, swivels and begins to fire, ejecting brass casings that clatter loudly onto the steel deck. The air fills with the smell of cordite and impending impact. 0812 hours, the stratosphere, 80,000 feet above the ocean. The sky is a deep, bruising purple, fading to black at the zenith. The air is too thin to carry sound. The silence is absolute. A wedge-shaped hypersonic glider tears through this void, glowing like a meteor. Its carbon composite skin burns with a white-hot plasma sheath that ionizes the air around it. It travels at Mach 8, covering a mile every second. It does not fly straight. It skips across the density layers of the atmosphere like a flat stone on a pond. Suddenly, the silence breaks. 3 interceptor missiles rise from the cloud deck below. They climb on pillars of smokeless fire, their seeker heads spinning frantically to lock onto the burning star plummeting toward them. The kill vehicles separate from their boosters. They use small thrusters to adjust their path, twitching laterally in the vacuum. They are kinetic bullets trying to hit a bullet. The first interceptor closes the distance. The hypersonic glider detects the radar paint. It fires a burst of gas from its side port. The glider violently snaps to the left, pulling high G-forces that would liquefy a human pilot. The interceptor misses by 100 meters, flying uselessly into the black. The second interceptor anticipates the turn. It corrects its trajectory. The two objects merge at a combined closing speed of 15,000 miles per hour. There is no explosion of chemical explosives. The impact is purely kinetic. The force vaporizes the interceptor instantly. The glancing blow shears the starboard wing off the hypersonic glider. The weapon tumbles, spinning wildly out of control. It disintegrates under the aerodynamic stress, shredding into 1,000 pieces of burning debris that rain down toward the clouds. But there are more gliders. A second wedge drops its nose. It dives below the interceptor engagement envelope. It thickens the air around it as it descends to 60,000 feet. The friction turns the air into a blowtorch. It accelerates. The tracking radars on the ships below cannot hold the lock. The glider screams toward the surface, aiming for the massive steel island floating on the water. 0814 hours, the outer defense ring. The sound arrives before the visual, a tearing, shrieking roar that splits the sky. The sailors on the deck of the screening frigate instinctively cover their ears and crouch. The air pressure drops suddenly. The sea surface boils as the shockwave hits the water. 2 hypersonic missiles level out at 50 feet above the waves. They are no longer high-altitude gliders. The radar panels on the frigate spin wildly. They are sea-skimming predators. They move so fast they appear as blurred streaks of gray against the blue water. The fire control computers scream electronic warnings. The systems cannot calculate a lead angle. The targets are moving too fast. The phalanx close-in weapon system activates. The 6-barreled cannon spins into a blur. It emits a continuous buzzsaw growl. A stream of tungsten rounds erupts from the barrel, tracing a line of white splashes across the ocean surface. The stream chases the incoming missile, The missile detects the incoming fire. It banks hard right, pulling a 10G turn that no aircraft could survive. The tungsten rounds chew up empty water. The missile corrects its course instantly. It screams over the frigate's bridge. The sheer displacement of air shatters the bridge windows. Glass sprays inward, cutting the crew. The ship rolls violently in the turbulent wake. Antennae snap off the mast and clatter onto the deck. The missile does not strike the frigate. It ignores the smaller ship. It hunts larger prey. Behind the frigate, the destroyer launches a wall of chaff. Canisters explode overhead, creating a dense cloud of aluminum foil strips. The cloud glitters in the sun, designed to blind the missile's radar seeker. The missile plunges into the cloud. For a second, it disappears. The crew on the destroyer watches, breathless. The missile bursts out the other side. It did not take the bait. Its optical sensors locked onto the silhouette of the supercarrier miles away. It drops even lower, skimming mere feet above the wavetops. Salt spray kicks up behind it in a rooster tail of mist. It accelerates for the final impact. The destroyer's 5-inch gun fires a desperate, hopeless round that splashes a mile behind the target. The outer screen is breached. 8:15 hours, starboard bow, guided missile destroyer. The ship completes a violent emergency turn. The hull lists 40 degrees, dipping the starboard rail into the frothing ocean. On the bridge, the captain grabs the binnacle, his knuckles white. The tactical display shows the inbound track merging with their position. The close-in weapon system fires its last burst of tungsten, the barrels spinning down with a hollow mechanical whine. The magazine is empty. A second hypersonic glider trailing the first drops from the sky. It does not skim the water. It dives at a 45-degree angle, aiming directly for the ship's combat information center. The sailors on the deck look up. For a split second, they see a blinding flash of reflected sunlight on ceramic skin. The impact is silent for the crew inside. The missile strikes the superstructure just below the bridge wings. It travels at Mach 6. The kinetic energy transfer is equivalent to a tactical nuclear weapon. There is no chemical explosion. The warhead does not detonate. It does not have to. The sheer velocity vaporizes the steel hull upon contact. The entire forward superstructure disintegrates. A sphere of superheated plasma expands outward, instantly incinerating the paint, the radar arrays, and the men standing on the wing. The blast wave travels down through the ship's spine. The keel snaps. The sound catches up a fraction of a second later. A crack so loud it ruptures eardrums 3 miles away. The bow of the destroyer shears off completely. It tumbles into the sea, churning the water into a cauldron of steam and oil. The aft section, momentum still carrying it forward, plows into the debris field of its own front half. Twisted metal groans and shrieks. Aviation fuel from the helicopter hangar ignites, sending a fireball rolling across the remaining deck. Inside the hull, the lights die instantly. Emergency red lighting flickers and fails. Bulkheads collapse under the water pressure. The ocean rushes in, a terrifying torrent of black water sweeping away lockers, equipment, and sailors. The stern section lifts out of the water, the propellers still spinning in the air, dripping oil. The ship begins its final slide into the deep. 816 hours, starboard catwalk, supercarrier. The shockwave from the obliterated destroyer hits the massive hull. The steel plating rings like a struck bell. Debris from the explosion, burning metal, insulation, and shattered glass rains down onto the flight deck. It clatters against the canopies of parked fighter jets. The ship lists hard to port, fighting the laws of physics as the rudders bite into the water. The ocean sprays over the catwalks, soaking the gun crews who cling to the safety railings. The final hypersonic missile closes the distance. It is now visible to the naked eye. A black, jagged tear in the reality of the morning, surrounded by a halo of distorted air. It does not fly smooth. It vibrates, fighting the thick air at sea level. On the aft sponson, the rolling airframe missile launcher pivots instantly. The boxy launcher elevates. A ripple of fire erupts from the tubes. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! 3 interceptors spiral out, leaving corkscrew smoke trails. They accelerate to Mach 2 in a heartbeat. They intercept the target 2 miles out. The sky lights up with 3 distinct detonations. Shrapnel clouds bloom. The hypersonic missile bursts through the smoke. It is damaged. A jagged piece of its tail fin is missing. It wobbles, rolling slightly to the left, but its momentum is unstoppable. It corrects its course, aiming for the center of the ship's radar cross-section. The point defense cannons take over. The white domes of the rotary guns spin up. The radar tracks the incoming projectile. The barrels blur. A deafening mechanical roar drowns out the ocean. A solid tongue of flame erupts from the muzzles. Thousands of tungsten penetrator rounds vomit into the air every second. The The tracers form a solid, glowing rope of lead that lashes out toward the horizon. The stream of bullets walks onto the target. Sparks shower off the nose of the missile. The ceramic heat shield cracks. Chunks of the missile's skin peel away, tumbling into the sea. The weapon shudders violently under the impact of the defensive fire. But the warhead remains intact. It punches through the wall of lead. The sound of the missile's approach shifts from a roar to a high-pitched scream. It fills the sky, blotting out the sun. The gun barrels track it until they hit their stops. The weapon crosses the gunnel. ZO-8 17 hours, flight deck, supercarrier. The shadow of the missile races across the non-skid surface, faster than thought. A yellow-shirted director freezes, his wands raised. He looks up. The screech of tearing air shatters the bridge windows. Glass rains down on the officers inside. The noise hits a frequency that ruptures eardrums. The missile slams into the number 2 catapult track. It does not mushroom on impact. It penetrates. The hardened steel flight deck buckles like wet cardboard. The kinetic energy punches a hole 20 feet wide through the armored plating. The weapon burrows deep into the hangar bay below before the warhead triggers. The detonation lifts the center of the flight deck. A 50-ton section of steel flips into the air like a coin. The blast wave shears the landing gear off 3 parked fighter jets. They collapse onto their bellies, their frames snapping under the force. Fuel tanks rupture. Thousands of gallons of JP-5 jet fuel spray across the deck. The vapor ignites instantly. A wall of orange liquid fire rolls across the aft section. It engulfs the parked aircraft in a heartbeat. The heat melts the canopy glass on the jets. A fully loaded fighter sits in the path of the flames. The fire wraps around the missiles hanging on its wings. The warheads cook off. Boom! The secondary explosion disintegrates the aircraft. An engine turbine spins out of the inferno, scything through the parked row of tractors. Shrapnel sprays in a deadly fan. Burning debris rains down on the sailors manning the fire hoses. The blast pressure hurls 5 crewmen over the side of the ship. They fall 60 feet into the churning wake below. The massive ship shudders violently. It feels like the vessel has run aground at full speed. In the bridge, the captain is thrown against the tactical plot table. Dust and rust shake loose from the overhead pipes deep in the reactor department. The ship lists 5 degrees to port as water floods the lower hangar bay. The fire alarm panel on the bridge lights up like a Christmas tree. Every zone amidship signals a catastrophic breach. Wait 20 hours, hangar bay 2 supercarrier. The cavernous steel belly of the ship is a suffocating furnace. Thick, toxic black smoke churns against the ceiling, lowering like a heavy curtain. The only light comes from the flickering orange hellscape of burning aircraft and the hazy red beams of emergency lanterns. The heat is physical, a crushing weight that blisters exposed skin and melts plastic conduits. The roar of the fire is deafening, drowning out the groans of the twisting hull. A massive jagged hole in the overhead plating reveals the sky above. Burning aviation fuel drips down from the flight deck like liquid napalm. The flaming liquid splashes onto the hangar floor, spreading instantly across the non-skid surface. A forklift, unsecured and abandoned, slides across the tilting deck. It gathers speed. It slams into the bulkhead with a sickening crunch, pinning a stack of crates against the wall. The ship lists heavily to the port side, throwing sailors off balance as they scramble over the debris. Damage control teams surge into the inferno. They wear heavy flash gear and breathing masks, looking like aliens in the gloom. They haul a heavy seawater hose, their boots slipping on a mixture of fire-suppressing foam, oil, and blood. A petty officer screams orders through his mask, his voice distorted and harsh. The hose stiffens as the pumps kick in. A solid jet of white water blasts into the heart of the fire. The flames hiss violently, spitting angry clouds of superheated steam that scald the nozzle team. The fire fights back. An oxygen bottle on a burning maintenance cart explodes. The metal cylinder acts like a torpedo. It shoots across the bay, ricocheting off the steel pillars. It strikes a fire main pipe, rupturing the line. Salt water sprays out uncontrollably, adding to the flood rising around the sailor's ankles. A young sailor collapses, his suit smoking from the radiant heat. 2 shipmates grab his harness. They drag him backward, his boots scraping across the steel, pulling him away from the molten debris. In the central control station, the engineering officer grips the console rail to stay upright. The list indicator climbs past 8 degrees. The digital schematic of the ship is a sea of red warning lights. The fuel lines to the main propulsion shafts are severed. The vibration from the engines ceases. He slams the plastic cover down over the emergency reactor scram button and punches it. The control rods drop. The hum of the ship dies. The massive vessel begins to drift, dead in the water, consuming itself from the inside. 8:30 hours. The Philippine Sea. The roar of combat has faded. A heavy, suffocating silence settles over the water, broken only by the crackle of cooling metal and the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull. The supercarrier sits dead in the water. It lists 15 degrees to port, a wounded giant kneeling in the ocean. The waterline has risen to the edge of the hangar bay elevators. The sea laps at the blackened steel, dragging charred debris out with every receding swell. On the flight deck, the inferno has been beaten down to smoldering pockets of gray ash. The smell is overpowering, a toxic mix of burnt rubber, melted plastic, and cooked meat. A corpsman kneels in a puddle of fire-suppressing foam mixed with blood. He works mechanically. He tightens a tourniquet around the shattered leg of a young deck handler. He does not speak. He checks the pulse. He moves to the next body. Over the side, the ocean surface is a slick of iridescent oil. It stretches for a mile. Debris litters the water. Seat cushions, flight helmets, torn life jackets, and jagged pieces of aluminum skin. Survivors float in the black muck. Some tread water, waving weary oil-covered arms. Others float face down, drifting aimlessly with the current. A rescue helicopter hovers 10 feet above the waves. The rotor wash kicks up a blinding spray of oily mist. A swimmer jumps from the side door. He splashes into the water and strokes hard toward a group of sailors clinging to a piece of wreckage. He grabs a sailor by the collar. He hooks a carabiner to the man's vest. He gives a thumbs up. The winch whines, lifting the survivor dripping from the sea. In the distance, the horizon is empty where the destroyer once sailed. Only a patch of bubbling white water and a widening circle of diesel fuel mark its grave. The remaining frigates circle the wounded carrier. Their crews stand at the railings, watching the flagship burn. They do not move. They stare at the massive black column of smoke that rises straight up, piercing the clouds and staining the perfect blue sky.